Welcome everyone who's joined and thanks for joining today's session. Today's OrbusLive will be covering migration and migrating from iServer to iServer 365. And we've got Chris here from Arriva. Before he introduces himself, I'm Jack. I'm Customer Success Manager at Orbus Software. So I look after various of our iServer 365 customers based in Europe, and we've got Chris from Arriva. So Chris, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Many thanks, Jack. And I think in time-honoured tradition, it's a case of I'm supposed to say thanks for having me or thanks for inviting me. There we are. So hello, everyone. I'm Chris Barretto. I head up the enterprise architecture function at Arriva. I've been here for 16 months. It's part of the group CTO office and consists of enterprise architecture, solution architecture, data and BI.
Perfect. Thanks, Chris. And yeah, as we opened, so what we're kind of going to go over today is iServer and the experience of moving to iServer 365 and migration. So, Chris, I guess if you don't mind, just kind of opening with a little bit of context of kind of where you're at and what you've been doing and your experience over the past few months.
Yeah, sure. So effectively, sort of Orbus predated my joining. It was something that was originally sort of onboarded. Coming on board, I sort of needed to look at what is it that an EA function needed to do here at Arriva. It's relatively embryonic. Thinking about the group, Arriva is part of the Deutsche Bahn Group. We've got 10 European countries, operating companies. There is a fair bit going on, and as the corporate function, it's very much a case of, we need to sort of capture as much collateral as we can for all of our systems and services, which is, a mammoth task. And therefore, sort of having something like Orbus to actually start to create the content was something that was a high priority for us. I mean, the function, the EA function within Arriva is establishing capability, I'd say. So the use of an EA repository, timing-wise, is very good. Where we're at the moment, we've done some of the hygiene things in terms of strategies on, sort of cloud and data and so on. We're developing roadmaps. Once again, these are pretty much in good old traditional PowerPoint, but at some point we want to, ingest them into Orbus, policies, governance, and delivery oversight. And in terms of delivery oversight, that's really important to have the architecture reference, because that helps with, sort of developers, all other colleagues, knowing exactly what the landscape looks like.
Perfect. And yeah, you mentioned about obviously coming on board initially kind of as that iServer user. How was your experience? Obviously, you used iServer and then were part of the process of moving to iServer 365. Kind of what was part of that conversation? Why did you come to those decisions and how that process came about?
Yeah, I mean, sort of it was slightly organic, I've got to say, that so we were using the on-prem version. As I say, we're pretty much embryonic here, so we haven't got, sort of hundreds of thousands of objects and so on in there. The key content piece was a capability model, and effectively it was a case of, right, we want to make this more visible across the business together with other content. We happened to get into a contract conversation, and the opportunity popped up, as it always does, to look at what the future might hold. That's where we looked at, iServer SaaS version, and made the decision that, given where we were in our journey, that moving to the SaaS version would be great, longevity and so on. It brought other capabilities to us, and we hoped that it wouldn't be, a difficult exercise, which it proved not to be.
No, it's good to hear. And you mentioned obviously that it was a pretty kind of natural process that you came to. Before we get into the detail of, I guess, what that process involved and how that was for you, what were kind of some of the challenges that you were facing and kind of tasks that were ahead of you going into that process?
Yeah. No, I mean, sort of, I was, been, 16 months in here, it was a case of looking across the business. Arriva is a federated business. Each of the operating companies own their own P&L, and with that, you get the challenges of technology spend and acquisition and so on. And if we had one capability, we'd probably have it 2 or 3 times across the Arriva Group. So that was something that needed to get an inventory going on, and that's something that we've started to do with some of our colleagues in the other operating companies, not only for audit and governance purposes, but really to get a strong understanding of what our application landscape looks like. I would say that bringing all this information together in one place is always the challenge for the technology department. And therefore, this was a good opportunity. From a business perspective, we've obviously been hit like many other businesses, through pandemic impact. Passenger numbers have dropped, and we've got the challenge of, sustainability. It's a very big topic at the moment that companies need to show how they're progressing along that stream. So all of this means transformation. And transformation is change. And if you don't know where you start from, it makes it very difficult to understand where you're going. So I think many people on the stream will resonate with some of those issues.
No, but perfect. Appreciate that. And I think it's a good point you raised there about seeing your landscape and seeing the current picture. I think there are plenty of kind of organizations that move from iServer to iServer 365, and I think it's a lot more than just simply moving to the cloud. It's an opportunity to not only kind of grow and enhance and engage more of the business with what you've got, but also probably a good opportunity to kind of take a look at what you've amassed over the years and kind of review and select that. So kind of getting more into kind of then that transition, how did you find kind of that process for yourself in moving to essentially what is a new tool?
So the approach we decided to take, or I decided to take when thinking about the skill set of the team, and we were sort of at an early stage, was to sort of think of this as saying, right, let's run this as a managed service. So that's where I had the discussions with yourself, and we sort of identified a consultant who was going to be effectively a journey partner with us. Someone that we would have, linked to the account, and effectively sat down with Sergey and went through, what the phases steps are for a migration. He basically sort of, was our conscience and our hands on. I had one of the team sort of working alongside Sergey, so wherever he had questions around, sort of what content, is this content still relevant? We did the assurance, yes, no, etc. And it was effectively a very smooth process. We took a backup just to make sure, and then we did the migration. And not having, as I say, sort of, hundreds of thousands of attributes and content and relationships and models and so on, it wasn't a very difficult exercise. We did do a level of housekeeping. We also, decided on, how we would construct what models we'd use, etc. So we used the time during the migration to actually start to think, how would we really start using, iServer on the other side.
Absolutely, and I think it's, as you say, it's the good opportunity to take on board and kind of look and cleanse and kind of not necessarily restart, but reconsider and kind of, it's a good opportunity to rethink. Okay, is this the best approach? Is there anything we need to cleanse, remove, rethink? And I think, especially in your case, the ability to have that consultant who kind of followed the initial process and kind of kept consistent and has a good understanding of how you're looking to work, it then helps you kind of moving forwards of kind of providing suggestions and support. How I guess just picking up on the professional services side of things, obviously they've supported you during the initial conversation of kind of getting on board and looking at content and initial configuration. How have they helped you since you've deployed in terms of professional services and their support?
Yeah, so as part of the recontracting, I knew that we would need support, so we purchased a number of consultancy days, and basically sort of made a plan against those in terms of what one-to-one training might we need, what areas, sort of fast starts, looking at sort of models, looking at the application pack and risk pack and so on. You can consume these things and they can take a while to get your head around. So with the team who are jolly busy in their solution architecting in projects and so on, it was a case of I didn't want to pull them away from what is internal chargeable work. So having a consultant such as Sergey was brilliant, because we can ahead of the game sort of book some sessions. We can do show and tells with him. We can do working sessions. And to date, we've done what we've called a couple of Orbus days, or hackathon days, we've called them, whereby we've brought the whole team together. Sergey has, I'm in a room and the lights have gone out. So hang on, let me just wave. They might come back on again. No, they won't.
Always the way with automated lights.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not too bad.
Yeah. Okay. So yes, go on.
Perfect. No, yeah, I think it's good, especially with those days, kind of bringing the team together and having that opportunity to kind of bring, especially when it's different teams. I think it's easy to kind of for them to come kind of quite siloed or work separately and bring them together. You mentioned that it was pretty straightforward in terms of selecting data, and it was an opportunity to cleanse. How did you find kind of people or your team getting to grips with the new tool and the training side of things, which is also kind of an element to factor in?
Yeah, I will say that it is a mindset. Yeah, one, however technically based you are, it is a mindset that you have to get in tune with. So we had the original training as a team on the on-prem sort of platform, but then we did a sort of a transition training in terms of iServer SaaS version. I mean, there weren't too many changes there, but what that helped with, which I hoped it would, was to sort of further embed, decisions around modeling, our use of Archimate, how you use the, which models you use, sort of how you go about categories. So that was really helpful for the team. And we had, what we call an Orbus. We have an Orbus surgery every 1 to 2 weeks. And there, as a team, we get together and we discuss sort of, what have we done? What are we going to do? What are the things that we need to learn? Who's making progress in which area, and can sort of share that knowledge with other members of the team. And, that's basically been our approach, and it continues to be our approach. In fact, yesterday was another sort of Orbus day, and I couldn't be in the room with the team. So I was outside of the room and I had the cans on and I was listening, and the conversation from when it was, say, 2-3 months ago had moved dramatically in terms of we're discussing sort of some of our data modeling and what entities and attributes we need. And we got into that wonderful subject of layers, levels, how far down you need to go. And I thought, oh my gosh, here we go again. There's going to be half the team saying, oh, we must go down to finite detail, and the other half saying, no, we've got to keep it high. And guess what? As a team, because of the confidence they've built and understanding more about, not only content ingestion, but maintenance. Maintenance is just so important. It was a case of they stopped at around level 2, level 3, which I felt was, it wasn't something that needed to be prescribed. They came to it as a team.
Yeah, I think the one good thing that I've seen from yourselves and many other different examples as well is it's good to have that foundation and something to build on. We try and say don't run you before you can walk, in terms of I think there's the danger of trying to do everything at once, and then you struggle to really get good results straight away out of anything. So I think having that kind of foundation and building on it is definitely the way to go. We've got a couple of questions that have come through. So there was one question on what's the difference between cloud-hosted iServer and 365 iServer. So we won't go into too many details of features because there's quite a lot there, and we'd be here for a while. But what have been some of the key differences, Chris, for you between the two, and maybe some of the benefits that you've seen early on?
Well, number one, we don't need that wretched ODBC connection, etc., and having our IT ops to maintain that. So that's very good. It's just sort of single sign-on. We go directly into there, and it's seamless for us. Being able to in a way, there's nothing dramatic here. It's not sort of a road to Damascus moment, frankly, but it just feels more intuitive and easy to work with. I can't think of something that we thought, oh my gosh, this is dramatically better or dramatically worse. It just, the sense is it's just sort of easy to work with. It's another sort of online application that you're interacting with.
Perfect. And there are a couple of questions about the process. So I'm sure kind of our team will be able to put out some information on what the process involves as a follow-up from today's session. But just to go over some of the basics for those asking about what the migration process involves. Essentially, once the process kicks off, we'll have a kind of a kickoff or a welcome call with your customer success manager, your account manager, and you'll have a dedicated deployment manager who will kind of manage the deployment itself, really just to plan out and discuss what's going to be required of that project over the next kind of month, 2 months. So it'll start with kind of some simple workshops with one of our consultants. In Chris's case, he's mentioned and Sergey, and kind of discussing there, but it gives us the opportunity to sit down with you, review your database and what you've got, discuss what you want to bring over, what you want to review, what you want to change, and what you want to keep the same. We will then kind of go away following those 1, 2, 3, if necessary, scoping workshops, and our consultant will have the tools to kind of migrate and bring over that data for you and configure the environment for you. And then once that's taken place, we'll reconvene, make sure everything's okay, happy with it, everything's there that you require. We'll get you trained and moved over to the new tool. And then once you're up and running and all happy with iServer 365, then obviously we can look at, okay, you no longer need your iServer on-prem environment. That can be shut down once all is said and done and ready. But yeah, any more information you'd like, anyone who's an iServer customer, reach out to your account manager, and they'll be able to kind of go through the full process, discuss with you exactly what it involves. But that's a bit of a broad outline. And so yeah, we've covered kind of
Jack.
Yeah, go on. Sorry, Chris.
I might just say yes. If you follow the route that we went down, then effectively you need to be comfortable that the consultant has got access and administration access to your instance, and that if the consultant does any of the moves and so on there, then the timestamps and the names will be the consultant's name. So if you don't want that to be the case, then have one of your own staff who actually has the hands on the keyboard to do that. So it's just little things like that where people might think, who the heck was this? Yeah, why are they in the system? So you do have to just think and make sure your InfoSec buddies are cool with that.
Yeah, I think it's a good point you mentioned there about obviously that the consultants will typically try and have that one dedicated consultant that kind of can work alongside, see what you're doing, carry out training using your environment with some of your data to really show you real world examples of what iServer 365 is. So yeah, if that's kind of the common approach, but we kind of go through that configuration and migration alongside you. It's not something we just ask a couple of questions, disappear, and ta-da, here it is. It's something that we want to work with you to develop. You mentioned kind of touching on InfoSec. Obviously, there is a common question moving from an on-premise tool to what is a SaaS tool and is cloud-based. Were there any kind of InfoSec challenges, questions, queries, maybe that people should be aware of that you guys had, Chris?
Mm-hmm. I'd not say there was any challenges. I mean, sort of everyone on this stream, will understand about, it's data, and access, yeah, and it's all about compliance. So, I worked with our internal InfoSec team. We went through, the 27001 sort of compliance. We have and many companies will have this. We have an SAQ document, which is a security assessment questionnaire, which I've got all the questions that we believe are relevant, etc., that we asked Orbus to complete. We also, sort of went through pen testing and certification, who has access, etc. Verified that the Orbus pen test company is CREST certified, and we also sort of looked at data compliance regulations. Every company will have either industry standard or their own specific data compliance. So we went through that as well. So it was a full assurance process that we needed to go through, and we had artifacts that were signed off and lodged with the basically with the terms and conditions. The SaaS sort of contract. So we had a few clauses put in and other things that were modified. So I would say that pay particular attention in that space. Make sure that the contract terms, the data compliance, your own internal sort of assurance is fully sort of worked through, and make sure you talk that through with your CSM and the consultants, as the case may be. It takes a little time. It's not a 2-minute exercise, but once you've done it once, you've done it. So pay particular attention, get it done. Then you're fine. Anyone asks any questions later on, you can evidence the full assurance that was done and any artifacts that support that.
Perfect. And you mentioned obviously a bit of advice there for anyone looking at migrating. Is there anything else that, kind of looking back, having gone through that process, you'd kind of, any advice you'd give, or anything that maybe you'd say, be aware of this going into that process, to anyone who's interested in doing the same?
Mm-hmm. I think it will depend from new customer or fairly newish customers who are migrating like we did. There isn't a huge amount of content, so you go through a housekeeping exercise because there'll be content which is no longer relevant. So basically do the hard yards. Yeah, give yourself the opportunity to really understand all the content you've got in, what is still relevant that you want to take across. Anything you don't, then just park it, leave it in a backup. So you almost have a fresh start. And if there's a case of you might be a customer who has been using the product for 2, 3, 4, 5 years, you will have built up quite a bit of content there. There is this opportunity to do a check and balance and do a housekeep, maybe even refactor the way you're operating, the working practices you have, what standards you gave yourself for content creation and so on, and definitions. And it's a real good opportunity to really sort of look at what you've learned and your experience to date, and almost I say, if you needed to start again and do it slightly differently, then it gives you that opportunity. But there's a little bit of hard work there. Don't necessarily feel it's just a flick of a switch.
Perfect. And yeah, we've spoken kind of about the how you came about migrating, the process, how that went for you, and what it involves. Obviously, now starting to get into iServer 365 a little bit more. What are your kind of early impressions, early progress, and kind of thoughts thus far on iServer 365?
Yeah, so I guess my focus has turned from internal content creation, so the team creating content, to now sort of, what are we making available to, the organization. You kindly helped with doing a show and tell for us at one of our global technical design authority meetings. That's a session we hold once a month with our heads of IT from the various operating companies across Europe. From that, we had a fair bit of interest in terms of creating application catalogs. So that's something that teams found useful. Also, we've now sort of had sessions with our information security team. One of the first sort of corporate catalogs we put in was related to risk. So we've consolidated. There was multiple risk catalogs around the business. So we've consolidated all of those, modeled and ingested into Orbus, and now being able to create views that we can publish via SharePoint to give people a view of sort of how we're progressing against those risks in terms of mitigation and so on. So that's been really useful. That's where you start to then get the benefit, because it's not a closed database as such. You're exposing the value, the benefit of understanding what the landscape looks like. And to the point earlier, you can't do everything at once. It's just impossible, unless you have half a dozen people who can be dedicated on it. So you have to box clever. What are the key things that you're interested in? Capability model was one for us. Application catalog was another one for us. The risk catalog and management was a third one for us. And whilst bringing those to bear, in the background are solution architects. All the projects they're working on, we build in time there to actually put the designs and model the designs and changes that are happening to the landscape. So you have to time slice what you do, pick some priorities, get those sort of going, but then keep an underlying maintenance and more content sort of going into iServer. The other thing to do also is the last bit is around attestation. So with the catalog, application catalog going in there, we've identified business owners or owners, and we're looking on we'll start with a 6 monthly basis. Here you go, have a look. Is it all up to date? Has anything changed? Maintenance is just so important. Those who are very mature with the use will understand that far better, but it's something that I would call out.
Perfect. And you also raised a really good point there on kind of the show and tell that we ran, what was it, a couple of weeks ago now. And I think it's really important and useful if you can to kind of engage your stakeholders and management, whoever that may be, in that process. Obviously, I'm not saying they jump on your training and your configuration workshops, but kind of being involved and sharing that progress, I think really helps show, okay, to those people who've signed off or been part of that decision to migrate, which they will be and they'll be involved. This is the early progress. This is what we've got so far. This is where we want to go. I think it's something that's definitely helped yourselves, and kind of I'd advise as well. So kind of gone over kind of quite a few elements there. Before we kind of open up to see if there are any final questions, then you've migrated to iServer 365. What would be kind of your summary of how you found that process, the support you got, and how happy you are with it, essentially?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I mean, it was a great process. We didn't sort of experience any issues or WTF moments, in terms of the migration. Once again, I've got to caveat that in terms of we don't have hundreds of thousands of attributes in there at the moment, so there wasn't too much sort of in terms of assurance. I've mentioned before Sergey, he basically sort of chaperoned us through that process. All the behind the curtains piece of moving the data and all the rest of it, we didn't get involved in that at all. We did the assurance before and after, and he got on with that, and then we started to there were a couple of things we needed to clean up. Didn't take too long. We got it through it pretty quickly, and all I can say is it was it went very smoothly. I mean, we did lean on the Orbus team quite heavily on there because we only knew what we knew. So we made sure. I think I made sure you remember the calls, Jack, that needed your support and actually sort of be totally in there with us, and it worked well. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I've always got that weekly surgery spot empty just in case I'm summoned to help. But yeah, also just before we wrap up, a couple of questions that have come through as well. Anyone else who does have any questions, by the way, feel free to put them in the chat. If not, reach out to your account manager, to myself, to anyone at Orbus that you're speaking to that you're aware of. Happy to answer any questions directly, and I'm sure we'll have other sessions like these to answer similar questions. Got a question on the API side of things. So in the question was, were you using the APIs before to communicate to other places, BI dashboards or anything else? I think I can take that one if you don't mind, Chris. I think in the case of Arriva, there wasn't too much of the API side to bring over. iServer 365 does have a dedicated API, so we'll be able to kind of discuss that as part of the configuration process to kind of recap what you've got and how much of that needs to be brought over to iServer 365, and that will include things like the API. And you mentioned BI dashboards. We do also have many out-of-the-box BI dashboards with iServer 365. So with things like bringing those over, it's okay, let's look at what we've got available on iServer 365. Does that tick the box? Do we need to bring over custom work like APIs, like Power BI dashboards, Power Automate work, and so on? But we do have the dedicated API there. It is flexible, and lots of people do use that. So it's a case of adding that in as part of the project to consider when you're migrating, of what, again, kind of as Chris said, reconsidering what needs to be brought over, how it all needs to be connected, what's the master for data. Often people looking at things like integrating with ServiceNow, that relationship. So all things to consider, all things that are possible and that we tend to discuss during that configuration kind of workshop with the consultant at the beginning of the process. We've got another question on we've got a couple of questions coming in, but just kind of running slightly over on time as we're up until past. So anyone who we haven't been able to get back to, obviously we'll reach out directly. Chris, any kind of closing comments before we wrap up at all?
I would just say that it's been a good journey for us from sort of when we migrated to where we are now. We've got stakeholders who are really understanding the benefit of why, as architects, we need to sort of keep records of what our as-is capability is and our to-be capabilities might be. They're seeing the benefit there, and we're getting more interest. Have we got enough time to do it all? No, we haven't. But we try to prioritize and make sure that the things that are important we get into Orbus, and then we sort of display out to the communities that want to consume that. But yeah, it's certainly sort of given what is an embedding function, a real step up. The EA function, it's given us a step up in the organization to be able to demonstrate sort of what we're partly here for.
Perfect. Well, yeah, I think that's going to be everything for today's session. So, yeah, I'd like to thank Chris for joining us, helping us with the session today. Anyone who joined late, missed anything, the event will remain on our LinkedIn page to go back through. Any questions, obviously, do reach out to us. But if not, then thanks everyone for joining, and thanks Chris for joining and helping us with that as well today.